Hi everyone! Today's review is going to be on the Blush Tribe Neon Dreams Revamped palette. This video will of course have my thoughts and reviews on all of the eyeshadows as well as 5 eye looks and swatches. If you're unfamiliar with Blush Tribe, they are an indie brand out of the UK, and I am completely new to indie makeup. I don't think I've ever purchased something before that was considered indie. I've stuck to a lot of the commercial brands over the years, but when I saw this palette, I couldn't resist myself. So in talking about the palette packaging, you have a cardboard palette, which is great. I love cardboard. I know some people prefer plastic. For me, cardboard is where my heart is at. So I'm happy to see a very slim, compact packaging with cardboard. When you open it up, oh, those shadows, they get me every time. So there is a mirror on the top part, and then you have 9 eyeshadows here. The back of the palette does indicate that it's designed and formulated in the UK, but that it is produced in China. Blush Tribe is still a cruelty-free brand though, because I believe they do not sell within China, where they do require animal testing. Now with this palette, you are getting 9 shadows that are roughly 2 grams each. The back of the packaging doesn't actually indicate how much gram per shadow, but it does say that the net weight is 18 grams. So with 9 shadows and 18 grams, we can assume that they're roughly 2 grams each. I did order this online through their website and I paid £23.99 and $12.50 shipping, which in Canadian total came out to 66 bucks and 42 cents. Now that we've talked a little bit about the packaging, I'm gonna slide in some swatches so you can see exactly how these shadows look like swatched out on my arm. Alright, you've seen my swatches, so let's talk a little bit about these shadows. Now, the first thing you're going to notice is that these are very vibrant, very neon shadows. And in fact, it kind of disappoints me a little bit because the ring light that is lighting this whole video is actually washing the colors out. These are electrifying neons. These are so bright and so luminous. They are like punch you in your face neons. And that is exactly what drew me towards this palette. I don't even really remember initially where I saw this palette. It might have been in a YouTube video or it might have been on Instagram. But when I saw it, I knew I had to have it. It's been a really long time, I feel like, since I've seen neons put out in a palette, especially one that is just neons and they're all mattes. The last one I can really think of was the Sleek Acid palette, and that was a long time ago. So for me, I knew that no matter what the price tag was, and even though I had never tried this brand, I was going to be picking this up. So I placed my order as soon as it came back in stock on Blush Tribe's website. And I did feel like shipping took a while, but they didn't ship my order until I think 10 days after I'd placed it, because I think they were waiting for product to come in. Either way, once it did get into the mail system, which was I think around the 26th of April, it made it to Canada and to my doorstep by like May 2nd. So that was pretty good shipment time. Now, one of the things I need to point out with this palette is that you cannot use this eyeshadow palette as you would any other eyeshadow on the market. Neon pigment is particularly hard to work with. My understanding of it is that there's a lot of white in the base of the colors, which does result in a little bit more of a chalky texture than people are expecting. This has the unfortunate result of making them very difficult to blend, but that is not because of the formula of Blush Tribe's eyeshadows. I have to point that out because every single neon eyeshadow that I have ever worked with in my entire life has always had this inherent kind of blendability problem, and it's purely because the pigments are they're soft and powdery, and they're almost flaky in the sense that they will disappear if they are overworked. And I know a lot of people can get up in arms about neons doing that, and they just get really disappointed in how they perform. So for me, over the years, it's taken a lot of practice to figure out what works best for me. And without a doubt, I have to use not only eyeshadow primers, but I have to use some kind of sticky white base in order to get the eyeshadows to not only stick to my eye properly, but also to show up as vibrant as they appear in the palette. If you're looking at my eyes right now, that is loud, that is screaming neon, and that makes me so happy. But I cannot get this look unless I use a white eye primer or base. If I just applied these shadows on top of my regular eyelid color, it would look washed out, muted, and just really unfortunate. So with that all being said, I have to say, I find the consistency of all of these shadows completely equal. Like, all of them perform identical to all the other ones, which is to say that they are very pigmented when they go on, but they do have a tendency to cling to certain patches of the primer that you have on when they're placed on. I find that patting motions work best. Absolutely do not use sweeping motions in between the two colors if you want to blend them together. Patting back and forth between the two shadows works the best. So I did find that during application, I did have to spend a little bit more time working with these to make sure that they layered well together. And because you can't really blend them the way that you would a normal eyeshadow, the best way I feel in order to wear these is to wear them as a color gradient. So grab two colors that are beside each other on the color wheel and then use those two to blend together. Because I feel like if you're gonna try to blend purple into yellow, you're gonna get a little bit of a weird muddy mess just because they're not beside each other on the color wheel. But like blending the yellow with the orange, totally fine. Orange with the red, completely fine. I mean, just looking at my eyes, that's a rainbow that's wrapped around my eye. So any of these colors side by side are side by side on the color wheel as well. So it works out really well because they fade nicely into each other. My one predominant gripe with these shadows was the fact that I found I had a little bit of fading right in my deep eye crease. Like on the outer corner of my socket, I would notice around the 4 or 5 hour mark that I almost had like a little bit of wear on my eyelid. It was really bizarre. I've never really noticed that before with any other eyeshadows, but it was like the shadow just got tired of my eye opening and closing all day from blinking, that it just kind of like wore away a little bit in that outer corner. One of the colors I found the most interesting to use was Layla down here, because I find it's very rare to actually find a neon red shadow. They just don't seem to exist that much in the neon spectrum of colors. So I had a lot of fun playing with this one because even though it looks, I mean, I guess it would look the most muted out of all the shades in here, this one is so vibrant and so neon. That's what I have on the outer corner of my eye right now. And for red, I found that to be really fun. All right, now that you've heard my thoughts on the shadows, let's take a look at the 5 eye looks that I created using this palette. The first look uses Andrea on the lid, a very vibrant orange shade, and then I use Annam on the middle of the lid. I think that color is one of my favorites in this palette because it's such an interesting, deep but vibrant pumpkin orange shade. It's absolutely beautiful. And then I used Layla on the outer corner of the eye. Again, that neon red pigment is so impressive. I love it so much. You'll also note that whatever outer corner color I did in these eye looks, I would drag that shade all the way through my crease to basically use as a transition color. Because I wasn't going to be using any other shadows other than this palette, I needed a color that was going to sort of blend all the way through my crease. Look number 2 uses Maya on the lid. That's quite an intense purple pink. There's quite a bit of red in that base color, but it does, in contrast to the purple that's on the outer corner of my eye, come across quite pink on the lid. So the purple on the outer corner is Nadia, and of course I've dragged that through my crease here as well. And then to highlight the inner corner of my eye, I used Andrea. Look number 3 uses Rufia on the lid. I then put Sama on the outer corner and drag that again through the crease as well. I have Ruhina on the inner corner of the eye because I wanted the green to blend into something a little bit more vibrant on the inner corner, so that yellow really helps to amp it up. And then I took Nadia on the lower lash line and buffed that out. For look number 4, I have Ruhina on the inner corner of the lid. I put Andrea on the middle of the lid, and then I have Vanessa on the outer corner and then drag that color, of course, through the crease again. Okay, so for my last look, I'm gonna take you through the whole actual doing of it instead of just doing a voiceover, because neons are quite difficult to work with, and I wanna show you exactly how I do it. So I have already primed my eyes at this point, and I'm just gonna go on top with a white eyeshadow base. I'm using this one by Essence. It's a smoky 2-in-1 kohl liner, but the NYX Jumbo Eyeshadow Pencil in Milk works just the same. The reason that I am using a sticky white base is because neon pigments are very poofy, is almost the word I want to use. They are intensely bright, but they have a very solid white base, which makes them a little bit difficult, I feel, to adhere to the eye. So I need something that is brighter and more stark than my own skin tone. Even though I am pale, I'm still not a complete shade of paper white. So I need a base that is going to bring out the neon color as much as I can possibly get it. So I just layer this on top. I'll put it underneath my eye because we're also going to be putting shadow down there. I'm really sloppy with this. This is an utter mess, but I will blend this out with my finger. The point is just to get something sticky, which this eyeshadow base is, and something paler than my skin. Now, sometimes I feel like that's enough and sometimes it's not. So occasionally I'll go in with a little bit more specifically on the lid because that's usually where I want the brightest pigment, and just add a second layer there. Okay, so for actually applying neon pigments, I find people want to do their usual technique. They want to use a fluffy brush and they want to be able to blend back and forth windshield wiper motions that we're so used to doing. You cannot do this with neons. You just can't. In my experience, you need something that is a flat, stiff brush. This one is synthetic. It's from Sephora collection. It doesn't even have a name on it. You need something really stiff and flat. And this is going to basically do everything on my eye. The only thing that it will not do for me is blend out the very edge of the shadow. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's get started on the pigment here. So I'm going to be doing a rainbow eye, and I'm going to start with yellow on the inner corner of my eye. So when I go into the shadow, I am just patting it. You get a ton of pigment on your brush, and then you pat on top of your eye. Now, neons, you will find, do not like to be overworked. You cannot go in repeatedly with the color and hope to get a good result. So this sometimes takes a bit of practice, but you pat all over the place. It sticks to the eyeshadow base below. And then if you tend to go over top again, you'll find that some areas will not stick as good as others. Okay, that's my yellow one. I'm gonna go in with my next shade, which is the orange right here. Same brush. You can use the same side or flip it over. If you've got one of those color switches, you can use that too. But I find going back and forth between the two colors that it ends up meshing together quite well. And I'm just going to layer that beside the other one. I am not sweeping, I am not dragging, I am patting back and forth where I want the pigment. So that's a pretty harsh line. So what I'll do at this point is I'll take a little bit of the yellow and start patting between the two colors. And if I find the yellow is overtaking the orange, then I'll go back into the orange and pat between them. But you will notice, and you can probably see it right here, that the pigment does not always adhere to the exact same area of your eye every single time. This is not a particular problem with these shadows. This is just neons in general. They are very poofy, they're very light and airy, and they just don't perform the exact same as a normal eyeshadow. So it takes quite a while to get used to working with them. Okay, with that one on, I'm gonna go in with Annam, which is the next deepest orange shade. That's just gonna go over here. Again, same technique. I am just patting the color on, and then I will pat over the sort of line to blend them together. Okay, I just turned down the brightness a little bit because I realized the neons weren't showing up as true to color as they appeared, just because the ring light is reflecting too much color, but you should be able to see quite a bit more now. Okay, with the oranges on, I'm gonna go in with the red called Layla. And again, still that same brush, patting it out to the outer edges. Okay, now I like the color gradient here, but this top area is pretty terrible in my opinion. So I'm gonna take the exact same brush I was using with whatever leftover red is on the top, and then I'm just going to pat along that edge because I wanna take the red and drag it all the way across. And even with a patting motion, you can get a pretty good blend out, but I will be going in with another brush afterwards to soften it. If you need a little bit more pigment, you can go back into the palette and then just gently pat it into place. The point is to use less and less pigment on your brush as you tap it the higher up on your brow bone. Okay, so that's pretty good for a flat brush, but I would never leave it like that. So I'm going to take a fluffy brush, and then this one is completely clean, and then I'm just going to run it along the edges here. And this is pretty much for me the only time that I can ever do a windshield wiper motion, because I'm just trying to buff out those edges. And if I was trying to buff between the two colors that are neon, it would just float away. It would just completely dissolve off of my eye. And if you feel like you lost any pigmentation from here because the brush is kind of fluffy, just go back in with your pigment, with your flat brush, and then pull it up a little bit higher. Now, if you're looking close up at my eye, you can see some areas that are brighter than others. I have learned that I can't go back in and fix that because it just won't work. I run the risk of ruining the eyeshadow look. So I've just kind of learned to accept that some neon pigment is just going to look a little bit patchy in areas, and honestly, I'm okay with it. Okay, for the lower lash line, I'm gonna start in with the green and just continue wrapping that around. I am taking this on a more precise, smaller brush. This is another one by Sephora Collection. They call it their smudge brush, just because that flat shader one will not fit under my eye and I need something a little bit more precise. So same idea, I'm just gonna be stamping it on directly. Moving on to the blue here, same brush. Dipping it in and then just stippling it on really. And then finally the purple over here called Nadia, right at the very edge. And I'm gonna pull this color all the way up here because I'm gonna use a winged liner to cut that line and separate the two colors. So I'm not gonna blend between the two, I'm just gonna pull it up high. Okay, so that's my color in place, but same idea. I don't like that harsh edge, so I will go back in with the same brush that I used to blend the top. Swirl it off as much as you can, or if you have a clean brush, go with that, and then use that to blend out the edges here. You just want to soften them a little bit, and I personally tend to notice when I do this that a lot of the color will flake away a little bit, so I will go back in with the brush that I was using before and relayer the color on top. But for now, I just want a smoother edge here. And you will notice in the fold of my eye, I'm missing a little bit of color. So pull it down and stamp it on. If you find it sticking quite a bit, it's because it adhered to the base quite well, which is good, but if you didn't blend out your base very well, then you'll find that it kind of gives you a little bit of a patchy edge. I can fix that with foundation afterwards though. I really love how this rainbow look came out. It is especially neon, which makes me super happy, and I love any kind of rainbow look. But I will point out that this is one of the easier ways to use neons because you're using colors that are beside each other on the color wheel. So it's a lot easier to get a gradient look when you're doing that. All right, so you have seen the 5 eye looks that I created with the Blush Tribe Neon Dreams palette. You've seen swatches, you've heard my thoughts on the shadows and how the neons perform. Do I recommend this palette? Is the final question, I guess you're probably asking. And it's funny because I love this intensely because the colors are beautiful, but I have to point out that they are a little bit more difficult to work with. And if somebody goes into this palette thinking that they can just use it as they have with every other eyeshadow they've used on the market, they're gonna be disappointed. And that's sad to say because I think we're still hunting for neon shadows that are buttery and smooth and blendable just like any other pigment. But to date, I've never found one like that. So for me, I really enjoy this because I'm willing to work with the shadow and sort of change up my method of application in order to get the best color payoff. But if somebody's not willing to change how they're doing their makeup or they're wanting to go in just as they've always have, I think they'll be really disappointed in this palette, which is sad to say because this thing is beautiful. I love playing with it. I have loved the eye looks that I've come up with using this palette, but I don't think it's for everybody just because it will be quite difficult for some people to use. That's not really a negative, by the way, for Blush Tribe and this palette. It's just neons in general are inherently hard to work with, and I hope people realize that because at the end of the day, this is not a bad palette. It's just that the pigments in it are much different than people are used to. But the good for me is that I loved every single eyeshadow look that I put together with this palette. Everything is vibrant, loud, neon, and matte. That's the part that makes me so happy. I love that they're matte shadows. And I know I've already said this, but they're all sort of in that same color tone None of these stick out as being too dark, which is great because then they all blend together seamlessly. So I'm really happy that I bought this palette, and that's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. So I think it was worth the money spent, even though it was 66 bucks, which still kind of makes me go, ooh, that's a lot of money. But if I didn't have to pay for that shipping cost, that would have reduced it down to like roughly about 45 maybe, and I think that's quite a reasonable price tag. And those are in Canadian dollars, by the way. So I love the Blush Tribe Neon Dreams palette, and if you try it out, I hope you like it too. Anyway, that's gonna be it for the Blush Tribe Neon Dreams review. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found this helpful, and I will see you next time. Bye.